Welcome,
Hi.
everybody,
Oh,
to
yeah.
today's session of Value Added 101. My name is Naomi Blue Summers. I'm the operations coordinator here at the Wahoo Value Added Product Development Center. These webinars are something that we hold on a monthly basis, and we cover different topics, everything from packaging to marketing to regulatory compliance in a manufacturing facility. Today, I'm very excited to introduce Catherine Weinhold. She'll be leading us in a conversation about innovation today. Catherine, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Naomi. I'm so excited to meet you all. I've heard so much about this work through my friend Chris Bailey, and excited to share some thoughts about innovation with you all today. This is going to be pretty abstract. I love that there's not a ton of us, so feel free to jump in, ask questions anytime. I would love for this to be a conversation because I want it to be valuable for you all. I'm going to share some slides and I won't be able to see your hands if you've got them raised, but Naomi will. So feel free to just jump on in. Okay. Share, tested this out earlier. Definitely works. Okay. Okay. So we're going to talk about innovation and really a practical approach to innovation. My background, I've had a lot of jobs, been kind of all over the place, but I was invited to join the Adidas innovation team in 2014. And when I was invited to join that team, I was terrified. I was experiencing some massive imposter syndrome. I felt like maybe they made a mistake by inviting me to join. And so I did what I always do when I'm nervous. I went to the library and I checked out every book I could on innovation and studied the science of innovation. And when I learned about the science behind innovation and then over the years applied that to innovation in practice, I felt a lot better about it too. And I think we throw around innovation like everyone should be innovative, or our goal is to innovate this, innovate that. But we don't really talk about what does it mean to be innovative? How do you get there? So that's what this is going to be focused on today. How do we prime our brains for innovation, and what are some tools that we can use to get there? So this is me. Uh, this is me at the Adidas headquarters, actually, standing on footprint of Stan Smith. Stan Smith are my favorite Adidas shoes. Still wear them, even though I don't work there anymore. I have two teenagers. I'm an explorer play type. So I know this is in the chat, and I think it was sent out before, but Stuart Brown is this incredible researcher who's done some really good on play and how it shapes the brain, how it affects our work, and how it affects our ability to be innovative. So I love this play style quiz because it helps you sort of discover what does play mean for you. And as we'll talk about later, play is really important for innovation. So I'm an explorer play type, which means I like to spend my time reading or traipsing through the forest and discovering new things. Basically, I play through learning. And I think if we're aware of our play types, then we can structure our regenerative time a little bit better to make sure that we are playing consistently. I have a long time career in technology and innovation, over 20 years. This is basically what I've been doing since I graduated from college, even though it has nothing to do with what I studied in college. Naomi and I were just chatting about that. And currently, I'm the executive director for Built Oregon. Built Oregon is a nonprofit based in Portland, and we help champion, connect, and support the people behind Oregon's consumer products. So, not specifically food and bev, but there's a lot of food and bev companies in our Built family. So, I work with a lot of folks who are focused on food and bev. Okay, so if we were in person, I would make you all an icebreaker, but we're not in person. So I'm just going to talk about icebreakers. But I'm curious if icebreakers are a thing that people generally find cringy. I can't see your hands, so I'm just going to assume you hate them because most people do. And I'm gonna like try to champion icebreakers a little bit as we get started on this meeting. For a few reasons why I like icebreakers. One, it's a mental palate cleanser. When you walk into a room and you're trying to be innovative, you're carrying with you like all the stuff of your day before, like to the conversation you had at lunch, or the meeting you just got out of, or the finance situation you were trying to figure out before. So an icebreaker can just kind of like mentally cleanse that and recenter you into the context of the meeting that you're about to have. I also like them because they start to create emotional trust, which I'll talk a little bit more about trust later on. But I think emotional trust is a really key component for high performing teams. It also helps our brains to get relaxed. It is really hard, and I'll talk about this later too. It's really hard for us to be innovative when we're stressed out. But if we're thinking of something kind of goofy that makes us laugh, we can get in a better frame of mind to be innovative. And I think a lot of people who hate icebreakers, which I'm assuming is at least some of you, my sister told me once that when she found out she was going to be in a meeting and there were icebreakers, she would go to the bathroom and hide for 20 minutes because she'd rather people think she had like serious digestive issues than participate in an icebreaker. And I get it. There's a lot of really bad icebreakers out there. And so I want to share with you, as you think about introducing icebreakers into your regular practice, kind of the do's and don'ts of good icebreakers. If you take nothing away from this, I hope you never ask these questions again. Okay, so the first one, when you're thinking about an icebreaker, make sure it doesn't reveal privilege. Questions like, what was your first car, or what was your first job? That tells me a lot more about the financial situation you grew up in than it does about you. And it can be really othering and isolating. I have a friend who works at Stanford. She came from a blue collar family, working class family. That is not most of the people at Stanford. And when they start icebreakers with, what was your first job growing up? And her first job was working at Burger King. And a lot of their first jobs were, oh, I was an intern at this bank consulting firm, or these high powered jobs. It instantly makes her feel like she doesn't belong in the group. So make sure your icebreaker doesn't reveal privilege. Second, don't make participants think too hard. Two truths and a lie might be a fun game to play at the bar with your friends, but it is a terrible icebreaker because you're just thinking about what you're going to say. You're not thinking about what the other person is saying. You're not actually making a connection. It's way too much energy. Okay, and then finally, a good icebreaker gives the participants the ability to share as much or as little as they want. I took this picture walking by a conference room once. I hate this question. I think this is the question that makes introverts want to cry. Tell us something no one in this room knows about you. Like, that's so intimidating. Um, never ask that question. It's like completely invasive. I like questions where people can answer with one answer, like one word, or they can answer with a whole story and you can get to know them, but it's their choice. So, some examples icebreakers that work. I really love food icebreakers. Everyone eats, right? So, here's some good ones. Your name and what was your least favorite food as a kid, and do you still hate it? This one, it allows you to say, like, if you're an introvert and you don't want to participate, you can say broccoli. It's okay now. Or you can say broccoli. But I realized my mom just didn't know how to cook broccoli. And then when I got older, I met this friend and they gave me steamed broccoli and they seasoned it and it was delicious. And now I love broccoli. So this one, it like gives you the flexibility to tell the story or just answer with one word. Or what's your go-to summer beverage? That's another good one. Something seasonal, something everyone can relate to. I also like giving people choices. Sometimes they're just not feeling the brilliant icebreaker that you thought of. So giving people choices is good. Okay, I know I've talked a lot about icebreakers, about actually doing an icebreaker, but this is like the hill I would die on. I want bad icebreakers to be like part of history. Let's get them out of here. They do not create a safe space for innovation or any kind of functional teams. Okay, I'll get back on topic now. We're going to talk about innovation. So defining innovation. Again, if we were all in the room, I would have you like shout out answers. But I think the point here is that innovation is really hard to define. Everyone has a different definition of what innovation is. It's not always the latest technology or the most recent groundbreaking whatever. Sometimes my favorite definition of innovation, I'm not saying this is the only one, but I'm saying my favorite definition of innovation is innovation solves a problem consumers didn't even know they had. And that can be done with food, that could be done with technology, that could be done with almost anything. But it's solving a problem consumers didn't know they had. That's new. That's innovative. This might be an interesting challenge to come up with in food and bev, like what is innovation? I sat through a food innovation seminar recently with a food trend expert. And she didn't really define innovation, but she talked about how you can recognize food innovation trends as like they start in very niche kind of regional places like farmers markets, and then they go to maybe like specialty regional stores, and then they graduate to like health food stores that are national, something like Whole Foods. And then that's when you see them on the shelf everywhere. And she used oat milk as an example. It was super interesting to like see the stages of food. But anyway, innovation, I'm going to use that as my working definition, but we all have our own definition. There's no right or wrong way. But I do have really strong opinions on what innovation is not. So I want to talk about this for a second. Innovation is not a single great idea or flash of brilliance. And I think that's a misnomer. It's not the work of one gifted and or creative person. As humans, we are storytellers, and it's a lot easier to tell a story where there's one hero rather than 10. But usually there's 10 heroes when you're talking about innovation. It's something that people collaborate on and iterate on and come up together. And that's why I'm talking about emotional trust and icebreakers, because innovation is kind of hard to do alone. So if you have people that you're working with, it's super important that you do this as a group and collaborative effort. Innovation does not always leverage the latest technology or trend. It is not unstructured. I think this is another misnomer. People think there's some creative genius in the back who has no regular schedule and they just come up with brilliant ideas on the fly. It's not something that requires huge budgets. You can test with almost no money, or sometimes absolutely no money. And it's not a series of wins, but it sort of is. And what I mean by this is it's an iterative process, and you're generally failing a lot before you actually win, which is why it's important to start small and iterate and get customer feedback. By the way, I like dogs. There's a lot of dogs in this presentation. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the foundations of innovation. I love this graphic, but also hate this graphic. So if there's any graphic designers in the audience, I would love some feedback here. Because this, well, I'll get to why I need feedback in the end, but essentially this is the foundations of innovation. So the bottom, most basic layer is individual and team purpose. If you and your team don't understand what you're doing, who you're doing it for, or why you are there in that role, you're not going to get anywhere innovative, like ever. I can promise you that. And this is when I work with teams on innovation, this is almost all the time where they fail, is people are there, but they're not sure where they're headed. I think it's Steve Jobs who has that quote that it's fine to argue about how to get to San Francisco, but if someone secretly wants to go to LA, you're screwed. Like if you all have to be going to San Francisco or somewhere in Hawaii, that's more fun than San Francisco, but you'll have to recognize where you're going as a group. Once you've established that, once everybody understands the mission, then you need to work on authentic connections. And this is what I talked about before, both the cognitive and emotional trust. Okay, once you trust each other, then, and this is the weird part, this is where innovation gets super weird. Then you need to get in a relaxed and happy state of mind. It's almost impossible to be innovative when you are stressed out. Stressed out brains have terrible ideas. So there's some work. We'll go through each of these layers in more detail. But once you have relaxed your brain, then that's when you can get into creative problem solving. And then finally, innovation. Innovation comes after that. But it's not a video game. You don't level up. It's not like once you've established your team purpose, you can move on and you never have to revisit that. Every time something changes, you're going to need to revisit that. Every time someone new comes to the team, you're going to need to revisit that. So this is all an iterative process. And that's why I was saying I don't love the graphic, because it looks like you level up and then you're done. We need something that's more circular, but still have foundations. I don't know, I haven't figured it out, but if anyone else, I would love the feedback. Okay, so we're going to take these apart one by one. We are going to start with innovation. Okay. Individual and team purpose. Oh, here's the quote. I wrote it down. Steve Jobs. It's okay to spend a lot of time arguing about which route to take to San Francisco when everyone wants to end up there. But a lot of time gets wasted in such arguments if one person wants to go to San Francisco and another secretly wants to go to San Diego. So that's the goal here, is to just make sure everybody understands what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I can't stress this enough. You're not wasting time. Don't assume everyone understands what you're doing. This is the biggest pitfall I've seen with teams who are trying to be innovative, is they don't understand what the direction is, who the consumer is, or why they are there. So some tools that I use for this. I like purpose workouts. So if you're getting people together talking about purpose, I'll talk about team canvas on the next slide, but also ground rules are also really helpful. These are things you can kind of co-create as a team and talk through this stuff. This is what team canvas looks like. And if you just Google team canvas, you'll find this, and you can download it. And there's a whole facilitation guide that goes with it. And it's a beautiful document. It takes a while. It takes about 4 hours to go through the whole thing, but you go through each of these segments. And what I like to do is I love in-person sessions. So I like to print it out really big and then get different colored post-it notes for each section. And then it's a really beautiful artifact at the end too. You can take a picture of it. But you go through people and roles, who's on the team and what's your role, and putting it up there like clarifies it. If you're not sure, what does Kelsey even do here? I don't know. Oh, that's what Kelsey does here. Oh, okay. Then it's helpful, because it's kind of like rude to ask, Kelsey, hey, what's your job? What do you do here? But Kelsey shares with everybody, then it's super clear. You talk about common goals, talk about personal goals. I love this one because, like, I'm going to just pick on Kelsey here, but if Kelsey is working on public speaking and that's something that she wants to get better at, then if everyone knows that, then it makes more sense if Kelsey gets more public speaking opportunities, right? Because that's something she said she was trying to work on. Then we go through values, needs and expectations. We set rules and activities, that things we want to adhere to as a team, assess our strengths and our weaknesses, and then come up with our purpose. And like I said, this takes a long time, like 4 hours, but it is 1,000% worth it to get everybody aligned and ready to go for innovation. I know it doesn't seem like this is an innovation tool, but it is definitely an innovation tool. Okay, once you're clear on that, everybody understands, then we need to make authentic connections. And this is where we talk about trust. Cedal Neely, who's a Harvard Business School professor, wrote a book called Remote Work Revolution. It's kind of a dry book. I'm not exactly recommending, but she breaks trust down into two components. There's cognitive trust and emotional trust. Cognitive trust is pretty easy to establish. Like, I say I'm going to do something and then I do it and then you trust me. Easy. Emotional trust is harder. That's like, you walk by my desk and you see a picture of my dog, and then we talk about dogs, and then we go get coffee, and I start to believe you got my back, like we're friends. And emotional trust is really important, but you have to be intentional about it. And that's why I like icebreakers, but there's other things you can do too. So I talked about warm-ups. A thank you box is really nice. This is a gratitude box. You could once a week just like, this is a really nice practice to get into. Once a week, just send someone an email, thank them, authentically thank them for something they helped you with. I guarantee you it's going to strengthen your connection, and that relationship is going to be a lot better. User guides are great for a group. So a user guide is an opportunity to, this is an old one that I used for a group called Playworks, but this is an opportunity to say, like, how should you work with me? So you can put whatever questions you want in here. I would maybe not make them too invasive, but like, what do you do? I'm an introvert or an extrovert. I enjoy blank and I recharge by blank. The best way to communicate with me. Some people love Slack, some people love text, some people love WhatsApp. If some people are never going to listen to their voicemail, it's important to know that. So you can share that here. What drives me nuts? What really annoys me? My best work day includes the team interactions I enjoy most are, but sometimes people misunderstand about me. That's one of my favorites. I think sometimes when I'm thinking deeply about something, my face looks angry. Sometimes people get the wrong message. So whenever I'm filling out one of these, I always say that. I promise I'm not angry. I'm just really thinking about what you said. and then anything else. And you could obviously change this up for whatever kind of segment you're working in, but it's just an opportunity for people to share a little bit about themselves. And the way I like to do this in groups is by pairing people up and have them interview each other, and then they present back each other's each other's user guide. So if Kelsey and I were working together, Kelsey would talk about me and I would talk about her. Sometimes it's hard to talk about yourself. It feels a little weird and awkward. But again, when you pair people up, and I love pairing people up who don't know each other, then they come away with like a new friend, a better understanding, a deeper understanding of that person. And then they often like rave about this person when they're sharing their user guide. So I love user guides, highly recommend. Okay, so now we're going to assume everyone trusts everybody, and we're going to work on happiness. I always tell people when you're in a bad mood and you're trying to be innovative, just abandon. Like if you cannot get yourself into a better mood, you're better off waiting for a different day. It's like trying to put a square peg in a round hole. It's not going to work. So we talked about Stuart Brown's play profiles, and in his book, he talks a lot about how play encourages innovation. So he talks about how humans are one of the only animals that doesn't play into adulthood, and play has a lot of benefits for other animals because it helps them learn to adapt to new activities and environments and predators. Play is super, super important, but I think as adults, we think it's not serious work activity. And even in like corporate environments, we sort of look down on people who are laughing too much at work or having too much of a good time. But those are the people that are going to innovate. Those people that are having a good time, they're going to be the innovators in the company. I have a study to share about this. So I think this was out of Northwestern University, and they tried to figure out if levity would result in a better cognitive capacity. So they had people in three groups. The first group watched a video and took a test on what they saw in the video, like a comprehension test. The second group watched a YouTube video, like a funny YouTube clip, like a stand-up comedian. And then they watched the video and took the test. Same video from the first group. And then the third group had to take a really hard math test with a proctor who was yelling at them the whole time. And then they watched the video and then they took the test. And the people who took the math test scored the worst. There were like literal parts, whole parts of the videos they didn't even see. And the people who scored the best were the people that watched the comedy clip. So it's super, super important. Your brain gets into this fight or flight mode, and you literally can't see in your peripheral vision what's going on. So in order to see the innovation on the outside, your brain has to be primed to see that. So there's clear benefits of this. There's also clear benefits for like, employee retention, encouraging trust in the workplace, all that too. I'm going to share with you one of my favorite games. So this is my favorite game is called Fake Companies. And I like to start off meetings with this. So here's the rules. You tell everyone that they have to come up with 3 words that start with the first letter of their last name. So my last name is Reinhold. So, but I use S, okay? So my last name started with an S. I might use these: smoked, sleep, or standard. And then a person with the last name ape, apple, and android. So it's just 3 random words. If you're working with someone whose first language is not English, give them extra time for this because it can be like stressful to come up with these words on the spot. But the idea is just come up with 3 random words. And then you take the Post-its and you give them to someone else. So it's even more random than that. You don't even have your Post-it. You have like another random Post-it, which is 3 words on it. So then you pair people up and you ask them to pick 1 word from each Post-it and create a fake company and then pitch it back to the group. So in this example, the people who were participating picked Sleep Aid, and they created this company for retired primates and paired them with people who had undergone traumatic breakups and didn't want to sleep alone. So you could pick a very sleepy, retired primate that was like roughly the size and shape of the person you broke up with to sleep with so that you wouldn't feel so lonely at night. And the idea is like that it just gets people laughing, gets people bonding, gets them thinking creatively. This is not a serious company. No one's ever going to do this. Sleep apes would probably still rip your face off. But this company, it gets everybody laughing, gets everybody moving. And this is good before you get innovative, before you actually get into innovation, which I know you're like, why we still haven't talked about innovation. But all this work is so important so that you can be innovative.
Hey, Kath,
Okay.
we have a question in the chat.
Oh, yeah.
Mark asked, how much of this is a group process versus individual pursuit?
So I am talking a lot about groups here. Individuals can also be innovative. I think it's a lot easier to do it when you're not alone. If you are doing it alone, you still need to make sure that your brain is happy and relaxed and that you're in a good, safe place to prime. And then, and when I get into innovation foundations and creative problem solving, this can be done alone for sure. In fact, I usually recommend it is done alone, people working alone together. But a lot of what I've talked to up till now has been group stuff.
Gotcha. We've got a question slash comment in the chat as well. It says, so innovators have a good sense of humor?
I hope so. They should. They should not take themselves too seriously. Okay, so once we are ready and primed for innovation, and if you're doing this alone, cheer yourself up, like watch a funny YouTube clip or something, and then you get into creative problem solving. So when you're into creative problem solving mode, this is when you're trying to think of a solution to the problem. And here is where you want to spend a lot of time on the problem that you're trying to solve. So if you say things like, how can we be more innovative as a group or as an individual? That is a really terrible question because that doesn't have enough guardrails to help you solve it. So more guardrails equals better. So how can we leverage this new packaging that we have available to us to promote sales in this region? Like that, more guardrails. So you want to like get as many guardrails as you can to do your creative problem solving session. If you're doing this in a group, recognizing that a lot of groups are mixed introverts and extroverts, that like myth of everybody just shouting out answers is a terrible way to do this. Because the extroverts will dominate the introverts and you'll never hear the introverts. If you're doing this alone, that's great too. But usually when I have these sessions in their group, I don't let anyone talk. I just let everyone be quiet and brainstorm on their own. So we can talk about crazy eights is kind of a fun alternative. You take a piece of paper, any kind of piece of paper, and you just fold it in half so that you get 8 squares. And then you take 8 minutes and just iterate in each square on an idea by yourself. That's all. Brainwriting is another one that I really like. And this is where you have people put a bunch of different solutions on a post-it, but just keep going. Just don't edit them. Just keep going. And I'm going to talk through that one a little bit more because that's one I kind of go back to a lot. And it's a quiet activity, but there are definitely ground rules. So when you're starting with brainwriting, I always review the rules, then talk about the question. Like talk about the question. Just like you can't spend too much time on team foundations and purpose, you can't spend too much time on the question. Everybody needs to understand the question and what are the parameters. Then we do creative silent ideation. So again, this can totally be done by yourself. And then grouping. If you're doing it in a large group, I'll include heat mapping. So that's where I'll give everybody sticker, like little round stickers, and then they can put the stickers on their favorites. And then you have a decider, which is someone who decides which one we're going to go with, and then the rest go on the maybe later shelf. Usually there's a lot of good ideas that come out of these sessions, but the maybe later shelf is something to try for next time. So the rules that I always use are first, when you're doing brainwriting, you want quantity, not quality. So it doesn't matter if the ideas are terrible. In fact, if I'm doing this as a group and I'm the facilitator, I intentionally put terrible ideas up there. Just so people are like, wow, my idea is not that bad. I'm gonna put mine up there too. Um, don't edit yourself. Just get it all out there. No commenting on the ideas. Again, this is if you're in a group setting. Even positive comments can be destructive. So if I say, wow, Mark, that was a really cool idea, then Naomi might feel like her idea is not so good. So if you're doing this in a group, just don't even comment. Just get it all out there. Building on other people's ideas. This is another great one. You could do this in a group, but you could do this on your own too. If your competitors are doing something really interesting and cool, build on their idea. It's not stealing to use somebody else's idea as inspiration. Don't lose focus. It's best to have your phone out of sight. Just focus on this activity. And then my last and most favorite one is get weird. And what I mean by this is that it's a lot easier to take a wild idea and scale it back into something that's feasible than it is to take a boring idea and make it innovative. So I like to focus on the like, what would the blue sky wild idea be? And then figure out how to make it happen rather than start with, oh, but we only have these materials, or we could only start here. We only have this much budget. That may be true. That may be true. But you can always scale something back to try and test rather than just taking what everyone else is doing and trying to call that innovative. Um, so then once you've got your really great idea, you've done this session, you've done it with yourself, or you've done it with a group, and you've got your great idea, then this is where innovation really begins. So all you've done so far is just come up with some fun ideas. And an idea is cheap. Um, I love good ideas, but when people are worried about like someone ripping off their idea from oh, what's that fundraising website? Kickstarter. I'm like, that's an idea is easy. The work is actually like building the product. It's building the company. It's building out the idea and really testing it. So that's what innovation is. And although it's the smallest one on the top, it's really like the longest slog. It's not glamorous. It's not fun. It's a really diligent project management. It's always revisiting foundations. It's making sure like if you're hiring people, you're hiring for innovation. So this is taking the idea, testing it out. What's the least effort way you can test out your idea? That is also like a really fun challenge. Like how can you take your wild idea and put the least amount of effort into it so that you can effectively test it? It could be something like a PowerPoint presentation for a product that doesn't exist, or it could be a small scale production to try to get feedback at a party. There's lots of ways to start this, but starting small and iterating is super important because if you're really working on something innovative, your first try is not going to be your final try. It's not going to be your final product. I I can almost guarantee that. I mean, I don't know everything, but I know I've never personally worked on a project where our first try, we knocked it out of the park. Our first try is something that, in fact, if your first try you knocked it out of the park, then you waited way too long to launch. You should have launched way earlier because you got a little too precious about that. So this is a process where you're always testing and iterating. It doesn't always feel good. Sometimes, especially if you've tried 47 times and they've all failed, it can feel really demotivating. So revisiting those foundations, making sure you're still in that relaxed and happy mindset to do innovation, to be innovative, and recognizing that is this long slog is super, super, super important. Cannot stress that enough. Because it's an ongoing process. And in this day and age, when there's so many companies out there, so many people doing interesting things, we're constantly needing to be innovative. So we should always be thinking of, what's next? And when we think about our challenges, one of the phrases I like to use is how might we? So people say, "Oh, you can't do that because of X." oh, how might we overcome X? And figuring that out with a more positive mindset is super, super important. Um, okay, I love to read, and so I'm going to end with a couple of books and then open it up for questions. These are books that I love and go to all the time. The first is Happiness Advantage, Sean Aker. He talks about the science of happiness. So if you were intrigued by like that study with the people taking the hard math test, that's in there along with a bunch of other really fun stories. Sprint. So this is Jake Knapp. This is the Google Sprint process. And this is a super, super interesting process. I wouldn't do this one alone, but you could do this with two people for sure. This is a 5-day process, and every single hour of every day is scripted. If you read this book, they'll walk you through it. And you go from starting with a problem on Monday to having a prototype that you're testing with consumers on Friday. It's very intense, but if you're trying to move fast, this is a great process to go through. And like I said, you don't have to invent it. I said in the beginning, innovation is not unstructured. Like these people have got a process. You don't have to invent one. Try this. Another one is Unleashed. So if you are a leader, you're leading teams, Francis Fried and Morris, they, in my opinion, they're the owners in this space. They know everything there is to know about leadership and unleashing the creative genius on your team. And then finally, Stuart Brown's play. I talk a lot about Stuart Brown. I just love this guy. Fun fact, if you are a reader and you email your favorite author, especially if it's a nerdy academic book, they're 100% going to email you back because they don't get all the fame that other people get. So they get really excited when people email them. So anyway, Stuart Brown, he's fantastic. Take the play quiz, figure out what your play style is, figure out how to play some more. Okay, that's it. That's all I've got. I'm going to stop sharing so we can talk and can see your faces.
So folks in the audience, please feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment. Um, you see that Mark and Michelle added some questions into the chat. Would you care to unmute yourself and ask?
Okay, I'll go ahead. Catherine,
Hi.
so I asked the question of you want to when you're putting a group together, I've had horrible experiences with some groups and I've had some pretty decent experience with groups, and I can't believe it's just the process. I suspect there are some people that you want to invite into the group and some people you do not want to invite into the group. So how do we select the people to get involved with a group?
That's a great question. I and I'm mixed on that because I think that probably the people that weren't great, maybe if they'd spent some more time on those bottom layers, might have had an opportunity to be greater. But generally, people that should be in the group are people that are invested in innovation, who care about seeing what is the next innovative leap and how they might get to the next level. As long as they're interested in the outcome and they don't feel like it's like an exercise that they just want to dial it in, um, those are good people to have in the discussion. More specifically, I like subject matter experts. So if you're looking at like innovating on uh, a customer service process, for example, I would get a customer service agent in the room, someone who like intimately knows the process, um, someone who has the power to decide. If it's a bunch of people who are like sort of interested, but nobody has the actual power to decide what is the next innovative thing that should be done, that can be really tough. So make sure there's someone with some decision power in the room. Um, and then a good mix of people, I think, who are attached to the project are important. Are there specific examples of people who you've seen like it didn't work out? Not, I'm not asking you to name
Yeah.
names, but like
Well,
profiles of people.
well, I think I think if we I don't want to say think out of the box, but I might have a problem. I think a lot of times we put ourselves in a box that we really shouldn't be in. And so if we're tied to a corporation and we tend to only talk to our coworkers, I think we're kind of missing the boat here. And if we're looking at innovation and, the whole idea of this innovation center is to produce food products that don't exist and to scale them up. And it's
Mm,
not happening naturally. So why is that not happening naturally? And one of the observations I'm finding is the people that talk about innovating are not the people that are producing the raw material. And so there's a huge disconnect between those two ends of it. And then the links, the number of steps that are needed to get from the raw material to a scaled product to a product that gets exported to get the blessing of the regulators or to get the funding of it. So there's, maybe a dozen different types of interest groups that are involved in this. And I think they're antagonistic to each other. So I just see a nightmare of getting all 12 of them in the same room.
mm,
And things
yeah.
don't move as a result of that.
Yeah, I can see that. So once we're talking about like scaling and distributing, that's not innovation anymore. That's where you've already got a great idea and you're ready to scale and distribute. So maybe those folks aren't
I'm
necessary for
not
the
sure about
innovation
that.
discussion.
I'm not sure about that. I mean, I'll give you a real life example. So we're
Okay.
raw material, everybody can sell the raw fresh produce. It's not a problem. That's simple to do. The distribution exists. There's all kinds of ways to do it. The value added side of it's tricky because there's new regulations that come in and there's a huge investment in equipment that needs to be get involved with it. And then turns out that it doesn't work really well. And then later there's a new technology that comes into play that might be something else. So it's a continually very dynamic process that's going on that's going in here. So just because there's a product that's out there already, that doesn't mean that's going to continue. Uh,
Mm,
you know, Oranges, those used to always be sold as oranges, but what's everybody's buying now is orange juice. And as one example. So that whole value added side of it is yeah, it's existing distribution, but we're finding a new product, a new form, or a new way of doing it. And that sometimes comes from new technology that exists. Freeze-dried products, for example. Frozen technology changed food
Yeah,
right
that's what
away.
I'm saying. As in, this one is okay.
Edwin,
yeah, that might have just been a mute mistake. So I think I hear what you're saying, Mark, is that maybe everyone is needed at the table, but it's tough to get everyone speaking the same language and working together.
or what comes first, get it started, get things moving, because otherwise we're circling the wagon and we're just shooting arrows at each other and nothing happens. I think that's part of the problem we keep running into all the time.
Yeah.
And what I'm
But
finding is when things really do happen, it's an individual just grabs the bull by the horns and just moves it and then pulls the group along with them. It's like the innovation, there's more of this monkey see and monkey do kind of stuff. So some of us are naturally adventurous and some of us are more followers. So why do we have a bunch of followers in a group to come up with a new idea?
yeah, if there are people who are not interested in actually contributing, then they shouldn't be part of the group. But I wonder if maybe they haven't felt empowered to contribute. I think this kind of goes back to that laying the foundation of who's there, why are they there, and making sure everybody's clear on roles and expertise in the room, and then really working on that, developing authentic connections. If there's antagonistic relationships, it's going to be really hard for innovation. Not that you can't have conflict in innovation. If you and I uh, if we're arguing about the idea, that's fine. But if we're arguing with each other, like as humans, that's where things break down. So I think it's super important to like lay the baseline for what are we doing here? What problem are we trying to solve? Are we trying to solve a problem specifically related to oranges and framing that problem up? And then who's invited into the room and why? Why are they invited into the room so that we all understand everybody's area of expertise around the table? Is how I would probably handle that. Does that make sense?
A lot of thought needs to be done on the early stages, no doubt.
A lot of thought. And yes, yeah, if you just get everybody in a room and say, okay, today we're going to be innovative, that is probably not going to work out.
Agreed.
It's like I always tell people when I'm planning a creative ideation session that it's like a party. You got to plan your party. You got to put some thought into how the party's going to go. Otherwise, it's going to be a terrible party. Um, so it needs to be really structured. into the approach. And then also, especially if there's antagonistic relationships, making sure that creativity is done in a way that invites everybody's voice, which is like why silent ideation is really good rather than people shouting stuff out. Or I've seen like, the person in charge, the leader, just like folding their arms and leaning back on a chair and just yelling things out. Like, oh, those are the worst sessions.
Can I chime in?
Yeah.
So my name is Michelle. A lot of the problem I think, and if you could figure this out, is we don't value farmers. So farmers are the ones who do all the hard work, and now they're being forced to be like manufacturers and understand packaging and all these other things because nobody values the farming and the products. And if we could find a way to just increase the price and pay farmers fairly, they wouldn't have to become food manufacturers and do all these other crazy things. So maybe you can put your group on that, Catherine.
I love that as thinking through how might we value farmers and take the work off of them. That'd be a great brainstorming question for a group. And again, invite people to like get weird with the answers there, because once you start inviting creative and weird solutions, things get really cool. I saw you also put a question in the chat about examples at Built where I've used this process for emerging companies. So I've only been in my role 4 months, but I have had a couple of experiences. I can share one of them, working with a very small founder who makes salsa, very, very good salsa, and is struggling with cost of goods because they are really anti-plastic. So that's like a no-go for them. They're not going to use plastic. They definitely want to use glass, and that means their cost of goods are just really high. And so we talked through how might we bring down the cost of goods with glass as a restraint, or pivot the business model so that cost of goods don't matter as much. And I think where we got to in that discussion was catering. So instead of selling individual glass jars, switching over to more of a catering model where everything can be more sustainable and no plastic would be necessary. That's just one example, but it's like how instead of just saying, well, I can't go wholesale because my cost of goods are too high and I'm not going to change my packaging. I guess that's it. That's the end. That's the end of my business. It's like opening up your brain to say, what is another door we might be able to walk through? What are some other options we might be able to explore? And I see there's a comment in there, business is risk, risk takers win and lose. Just hope one wins more than losers. And I think it's, yes, innovation is risk, but it doesn't have to be huge risk. You can test really small ideas. You can test, like I said, try to figure out like the easiest and cheapest way to test your idea before actually investing a lot in it. And one way is having conversations with your target market. There's a great book, I didn't put it in the presentation, but it's called The Mom Test. And it's written by a guy who has this viewpoint that I think Fitzpatrick is his last name, but he says, when you talk to consumers or investors about your idea or your business, because we are social creatures, we lie to each other. So if you're having a face-to-face conversation about your product or idea with someone, and you ask them if they think it's a good idea, they're going to say yes, but they're probably lying to you because it's like uncomfortable to say, no, I don't like that idea, or I don't think it's a good idea. And so he says you have to go into these conversations assuming everyone's lying to you and you are responsible for structuring your questions in a way that people can't lie to you. And it's called the mom test because he says if you structure your questions the right way, even your mom can't lie to you. So it's like a way, how do you even just take an idea and have conversations about it? You haven't invested anything into it. You're just testing it out. But how do you do that in such a way that you can get real feedback? The book is only like 120 pages long, so it's a really quick read. If you are comfortable with AI, there's a PDF copy out there, and once you read it, you can upload it to an agent and train an agent on it, and then ask the agent to come up with questions for you, which is helpful. Definitely recommend reading the book though, because AI is dumb and will come up with some wild stuff, so you need to edit it.
Hi, Catherine.
Hi.
Hi, how you doing? A great presentation, fantastic, I love it. I got a request. Could you give us some tips on how to try to get close to an innovative meeting on a Zoom call?
How to do this on our Zoom call?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
so many meetings are now forced onto the Zoom platform. So, what you've been talking about is fantastic if they're all in the room. What about we're
Yes.
sort of spread out over electronics?
I should have talked about that more. Thank you for calling that out. There are ways to do it on a Zoom call. Especially if you have, I would say more than 7 to 9 people is too big if you're really trying to be innovative. So you can do things like have an icebreaker and go through and everybody talks. There's great virtual tools to collaborate. You can do virtual collaboration. I think Figma is a good one. Google used to have one that I loved. They sunsetted it, which is lame. But virtual post-its, you can do virtual post-its together. I think if you're doing a Zoom call, it's super important that you have a facilitator, and the facilitator is not a participant. They just make sure all the tech runs smoothly. They make sure everybody gets a voice, a chance to contribute. And then they wrap things up and talk about next steps. Having that taken off the leader is super, super important. And I've done this before with other teams where we'll like do this as favors for each other. If I'm not involved in another team's work, but I'll facilitate for them if they facilitate for me, kind of like a trade situation. And then following up, there's tons of like virtual co-working tools that are really good and useful together, like project management tools when you're actually like in the innovation stage.
Great, thank you. I'll start digging into all those tools, and hopefully I can do a Zoom meeting that will be productive in innovation.
Yeah. I love the comments about Hawaii. I am not well versed on like what's going on in Hawaii. I've never even been to Hawaii, and I feel a little embarrassed saying that. But I can't speak to like what's specifically happening in Hawaii. That's maybe more of a Naomi or Kelsey or Chris conversation.
Yeah, definitely want to acknowledge that there are a lot of challenges. So thank you, Banner, for sharing your comments. And I think we can lean on what Catherine shared in the beginning of her presentation today about it's about building trust and thinking through the innovative process. She gave us a few different approaches to try out, and it's not necessarily going to be successful in the first try. It's a super iterative process. I think that's something I always have to personally remind myself as well.
Yeah, it requires some resilience. You got to keep going even when you've failed, because that doesn't mean the end. It just means it's time to try something new or pivot or tweak. I think that's why, sorry, I know we're getting like close on time here, but I think that's also why it's really important to have your question in mind. What is the question you're trying to solve? Because if you're clear on the question, then you can be more clear on what is the criteria of success. And when I'm in the middle of an innovation and I'm testing something out, I like to be really clear about my hypothesis, and make it as specific as possible. So like, I think that if I change my packaging to call out the health benefits of this particular ingredient, I am going to increase market share among this segment. If I'm super clear on that, then I can measure success more than I think if I change my packaging, I'll make more money. Like it's having like a really clear hypothesis of the problem you're trying to solve and how you're trying to solve it is better, in my opinion, in the experience. Even though almost 100% of the time, my first try, I've been completely wrong about my hypothesis.
So kind of tying in that statement and the questions that we've been discussing here. So how do you not get caught up in the how or the process or, how is this idea, how are you going to do it? How do you not let that bog you down when you're trying to be innovative?
Well, once you are trying to test it, then that's when you need to figure out the how. So I'm saying don't let that bog you down in the creative ideation process. But then once you try to figure out how to test it, then you need to tinker and scale. And that's when it's helpful to have experts who can weigh in and say, like, we could fake this with this, or we could make it look like we've done this with this, and then have conversations about it and try to gauge reaction based on that. Because when you try to like go all in and like get the machine and the technology that you need to produce it, and it's still at the hypothesis stage, the risk is a lot higher. You could potentially be risking a huge financial investment for something that you don't know if it's going to work yet. So then that's where you can also get creative and like, how can I test this in a really small way? Like, what is the least amount of effort I could put into this to get a valid test? I like consumer conversations. The mom test is great for that.
Can I chime in again?
Yeah.
Okay, so I put a link in there for everyone to read because in terms of innovation and AI, I just thought this was so crazy. So there's a company in Chile that is working with like a lot of consumer packaged goods, but I think with AI, especially if you're farming, you're trying to think of other ways and products you can develop with your produce, right? So one example in here is this company is actually based on AI because it doesn't have like a brain or it doesn't have a taste to say, oh, that would be terrible. But they're actually making a milk with cabbage and pineapple, like a plant-based milk alternative. And you're just like, what? Um, so I just love these kinds of ideas and reads to make us all be more innovative and, crazy is good.
Crazy is good. That's the headline. That should have been the subtop. Crazy is good.
Well, thank you so much, Catherine, for sharing your insights, your experience, and different approaches that we can try with the various challenges that we're trying to solve day to day as well as long term. Thank you, everybody who joined today for being super engaged. And this will be, so this recording will be posted on the Leeward Community College YouTube channel in a few days. So if you'd like to go back and revisit any of those thoughts, it will be available online. With that, I would like to wrap up for today. Mahalo, everybody, for joining, and hope to see you on our next one.